Let's begin. Today, I'm going to talk about how to increase your vocabulary. And the reason this topic came up, and I apologize, these are very small messages on your screen, but I will tell you what they say. They're from two people, but I had many similar messages saying that I know a lot of vocabulary, but when I start speaking, I use simple words or my vocabulary is very limited. What can I do to fix it? And it's from these messages, these questions, that this live arrives. So this is why the inspiration for this live came from your messages. So I want to thank you, and hopefully by the end I will answer the questions. How do I overcome this? I know a lot of words, but I'm not able to use them. I use only simple words. I want to answer that question at the very end, and hopefully it will be evident as we go through. All right, let's begin. 2 reasons exist to expand your vocabulary. Number 1, you need it for your job or for an international exam or any other university or school test. This is a practical reason. Number 2, you like the sound, look, meaning of a word or phrase. And this is what I would call aesthetical or aesthetics. So it's not practical, but because it's, for these sort of aesthetic reasons. Now, practical reasons are short-term sort of methods. You need to expand your vocabulary for this exam on this date. Aesthetics, or doing it because you enjoy it or you love it or there's just a beauty about it. The language. This is a long-term proposition. If you fall in love, true love, you rarely fall out of it. I think there's a life lesson in there as well. But it certainly holds true for language and for vocabulary. So if you fall in love with the language and how it's formed, then this process of learning becomes, as I will argue all the way through this live, it becomes a lot more pleasurable and easier. All right. Now, what do I mean by aesthetics? Here are 3 sentences that I use to sort of increase my vocabulary. And I want you to notice one of them focuses mainly on a word, another is a phrase that I like, and the third one is a general style. So which contains a word that I normally don't use. So how do I expand my vocabulary? I ask this question. Have I ever used this word or this phrase myself? And if I haven't, or I haven't in a long time, that means it's not in my active vocabulary. So I need to learn it or relearn it. So here are just examples of aesthetics. I liked a word here. I like the word turgid. A turgid and incomprehensible letter. Turgid is very pompous, very bombastic. Those are also big words, and I apologize. A phrase, I like the turn of phrase sniggers, a few sniggers of criticism. I like that. Snigger is sort of a sarcastic laugh or a critical laugh. I like that phrase, so I wrote this sentence down. And then finally, general style. I like how this sentence begins, and it uses the word prickly in a context that I would normally not use. Prickly and defensive this may have been, but it was a good deal better than the pompous and dismissive letter. So I like how that sentence flows in the beginning. And again, it's not a sentence I would normally have used in the past, and the word prickly is used in a context that I would not normally use. So these are the 3 criteria I use to select words to learn and make active in my vocabulary. I love a word, I love a phrase, or I love the general style. Now, all of us are different. You have to ask yourself, what is it that attracts me? And hopefully there's something that attracts you to the language and not just a fear of failing an exam. But of course, this is also good motivation. But let me tell you what all 3 of these have in common, regardless of whether it's a word, a phrase, or general style. They all are in context. They all have a larger phrase. In other words, I'm not just memorizing words. This word means this. I'm not doing that. I'm learning words in context. So there are three benefits to the approach I have. The one, of course, the first and main benefit is you learn the meaning of the word. The second benefit, which is very popular among English teachers today, learning in context. You learn context but context within the sentence, within a sentence that someone else has used, someone whom you respect, someone with authority, someone you can trust. And next week, I'm going to talk about what is good literature, because 2 weeks ago I made a story post on good writing, and it requires reading good literature, and I got a bevy of messages, a lot of messages, bevy, B-E-V-Y, a bevy of, or a slew, S-L-E-W, a slew of messages saying what is good literature. I'm going to talk about that next week, sources that you can rely on. But there's a third benefit that is rarely articulated amongst teachers, and I think it's just as critical, and that is that you imbibe is to sort of, you internalize it, you imbibe a different style, a better style, or a new style. So you start to diversify your English style. These three, this trio, you learn by learning technically one word. So it's 3 in 1. So if you want to talk, and a lot of people ask me, how can I learn quickly? This is the quickest manner I know how. Learning meaning, context, and style at the same time. This is my definition of learning quickly. A lot of people ask the question, how can I learn vocabulary quickly? I need to be advanced. This is oftentimes a wrong way to address the question. I have red flags. I'm nervous that you're approaching this in the wrong way, because memorizing words is generally not going to increase your active vocabulary. I'll say it again later, but I'll say it one more time now. Memorizing, rote memorization, R-O-T-E, rote, where you just memorize it. Rote learning of new words, that means memorizing new words, is not a great method to increase your vocabulary, because, as I will show you later, you might know in theory what the word means, but in practice you will probably never use it. And that is getting at the crux, or the bottom of the answers or frustrations of the first 2 messages I received that I showed you in this PowerPoint. People are frustrated because they don't know how to use them, and they're probably trying to memorize words. And this is not, in my view, a great solution. So most people do this. What do? They encounter a new word or phrase. They look up the word very dutifully. Dutifully is diligently. They dutifully look up the word. They say, oh, I know what that means. And then they promptly forget it the next day or 2 days later. We have a very good short-term memory, but medium and long-term, this doesn't generally work. And then we fail to use the new word in conversation, or in an oral exam, or in a job interview, or in our writing. And I'm going to tell you why that happens, because this is the process that I use. It's the process, so this is very practical. It's one that I've used my whole life. I'm a writer, and if anyone's a writer, you know that you're always learning your language. So I'm speaking to you as someone who's ahead of you in the race, but we're running the same race. Don't forget that. We're running the same race. I'm in student mode. I'm learning new words, new phrases, new vocabulary, just like you. But obviously, I'm probably farther ahead than most of you. That's natural. I'm a native speaker, for one. Now, what's the process of encountering a new word to making it active in your vocabulary, speaking and writing? All right, so first of all, we encounter a new word or phrase. We note it down. Now, this is the thing. We take a photo of it. we write it down, we type it in. But this is a critical stage that is often missing. Because if you just try to look at it, look up the word and remember it, it's not going to work. Unless you do that over the course of a year or so, 10 or 20 times, and you get very frustrated by this. Second, then the third step is to rehearse it. And I'll show you what I did later. I actually rehearsed sentences and phrases that I loved. And so, some people say, well, you don't speak like a typical native speaker sometimes. You speak in a different way. Partly it's because of what I'm telling you now. I will show you at the end. I have hundreds and hundreds of interesting sentences from writers I consider, past and present, the best writers in the world in English. And I borrow and memorize and read and look at, memorize meaning I read over and write their sentences that I like enough that I remember them. And then I use it in my own way. And then finally, once you've rehearsed it enough, practiced it, then it becomes part of your lexicon. You own it. Now, let's go into a little bit of detail on what I mean. Let's go step by step. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Are you ready? Now, if you have questions, write them in the box, the question box. I will get to your questions at the end. And I also want to say one thing. If you feel that your friends could enjoy or benefit from this live or the YouTube video that I'll put up later, please share it with them. Share this in a live. You can share it as a story or just share it individually with your friends. Thank you very much. All right. Let's look at new encounters. This is, of course, something that is happening to us if we have contact with the language all the time. We encounter new words, new phrases in films, in videos, YouTube videos, in conversations that we have with people, and in books or articles. So we're always encountering new words. That's common to all of us. But how do we deal with that? Step 2. Now, noting the word or phrase. Here's where we start to diverge. We have 2 different paths. The path of least resistance, the easiest path, is just to say, oh, I'll remember that, I'm sure. And surely you won't. You don't remember that word. And then you'll have to look it up again. Or you look it up, as I mentioned, dutifully, very diligently, and then you promptly forget it. Or you write it down, take a photo, or put it in your computer. Now, this takes more time. Sometimes you don't have a lot of time, so I take a screenshot or I quickly make a note. You have notes in your phone. You can quickly do that. That's an option. But this is a key second step if you want to fulfill step number 3, which is to rehearse it. Rehearse is a fancy term for practice. If you want to practice it, you have to have it written somewhere. So now there are 2 active ways to practice this. And I'm going to tell you what is not active, but what most people do. They'll look at a word and a definition, and in their mind, they'll say, okay, I got it. And they'll practice it in their mind. That is not active communication, and that will not lead to incorporating that word into an active vocabulary, speaking vocabulary. That will not work. That will not work. Now, what will work, what's worked for me, but it's, again, a little bit extra effort. And as you're seeing here, there is no easy solution. That's one of the overriding principles at the end we're going to look at. It takes work. If you're willing to put in the work in the right manner, in the manner I'm suggesting, you can increase your vocabulary. So step 3 is critical. I either speak the sentences out that I've created or that I've taken in fragment. I physically say it out loud, or I write it down. I've written hundreds, thousands of sentences and words over, the past 20 years, not just today, but in a short period. So you have to practice it actively. If you want to actively use it later in a different context, in a written or spoken form, you have to practice it in an active context before that time. It won't magically appear on your tongue. It doesn't happen for 99.5% of the people. The people who can do that are the exceptions. Please do not model yourself after these exceptions. I'm not an exception, and 99% of the people are not an exception. So it has to be actively practiced. There are two forms of active communication in any language: written and spoken. When you're doing it, not listening, that's passive. But when you physically do it yourself, that's active rehearsal or practice, and this will lead to a larger vocabulary. So then you can find out when you have real situations, live situations in conversation, in writing, or in an exam, if you're able to, if that word comes to you in the right moment, you know that you've practiced it enough. If it doesn't, don't worry, it's just a sign that you haven't rehearsed the word enough and you need to do it longer. All right, now let's go back to the process, because what I'm alluding to is the all-important factor of time. This process that I have elucidate is ELUCIDATE. To elucidate is to talk about in detail. This process that I've elucidated is time dependent. You need time. And what's interesting is most of the questions I receive on my Instagram, in my messages, is how can I learn this quickly? And let me tell you, if you learn something very quickly in terms of words, you will probably forget it very quickly too. There are no quick fixes in my experience. I mean, long-term quick fixes. There might be a short-term sort of hack, but there are no long-term. You can't sustain these short-term hacks in a long-term fashion, in my view. So you need time, and time can be on your side. It doesn't have to be the nemesis. Nemesis is your opponent, your enemy. It doesn't have to be a nemesis. Use time to your advantage, which means you plan ahead and you don't do everything at the last minute. If you have an IELTS exam in July, you start now. Give yourself 7 months, 8 months to thoroughly prepare. Don't start a month before. It's going to be a painful process, and you're not going to improve your vocabulary. You might short-term remember a few, but you won't really know how to use these words. All right, you learn faster, because a lot of people are asking, I want to learn faster. You learn faster through repetition of this process. This process speeds up the more you do it, not by memorizing words. That is not going to make you learn faster. Number 2, you learn faster when you enjoy the process, not by memorizing more words. Enjoying the process will allow you to remember things longer, because your attitude is very different. And I'm speaking now from experience. This is a much long-term, the best approach. Now, a few very critical key ideas I want to leave you with, and then we're going to look at questions. Now, just as a reminder, I'm going to put this on YouTube as well as on Instagram. All right, and key idea number 1, enjoy the process. I have to do, that's not enjoying it. Someone's forcing me to, versus I get to learn. Wow, I learned this. Now, some people, let me give you one example. These lives are a perfect example of enjoying the process of learning, because most Instagrammers that I've talked to, language Instagrammers, look at the live, this live that I'm giving and see, oh God, how do you do it every week? Which tells me their mindset is, you have to do it? And this is the wrong mindset. This tells me that they don't actually enjoy the process of teaching, versus the mindset that every week I get to hone my skills, sharpen what I really think, or learn new areas of the language. For me, this is an opportunity to learn and share. I genuinely enjoy these lives and I like preparing them because this is education for me. When you get to be a professor, you don't have a supervisor above you. You have a boss, but it's not the same. So you are my professor. The audience keeps me accountable so that I am learning. I am on record that every week I'm going to be here. And so I'm learning in this way thanks to you all, thanks to the audience. But it's a process that I enjoy. And I'm suggesting that you adopt the same mentality when you're learning words and phrases. You encounter it and you go, wow, that's a great word, or that's a great phrase, because that's how I learned or improved my language abilities to publish in the top journals and publishers in the world. So I'm giving you just an example. You can't see this, but you can see that it numbers into the 200s of words, sentences that I've written down that I like either a word in the phrase, or I like the phrase, or I like the style of the sentence as a total, as a sort of whole. And I would write them down. And then when I would walk somewhere or I'm in the metro, especially during my PhD, I was reading these and I loved it because it was like poetry. These sentences sing. So this wasn't something I had to do. It was exposing myself to beautiful language that I really enjoyed learning. So try to find that enjoyment. Find reasons to get excited about learning. I can't emphasize that enough. But even if you can't get excited, do know that fear is also a very good motivator. Fear of failure, fear of not getting the job, fear of the exam next Friday. These are also motivators, so that's fine. You can't always be excited, but if given a choice, go for excitement. Psychologically, it's a lot better proposition long term and it keeps you younger. So try to find reasons to be excited about it. For me, I love the style of the language of the new word within a sentence. I just found that really interesting. So whatever it is for you, find a reason to enjoy whatever you're learning and you will learn it faster. Number 3, active communication increases vocabulary. Just reading words in your mind and learning them, that's not active that's not active communication, and it will not directly lead to increased vocabulary. You increase your active vocabulary by practicing active communication before that moment through writing or through speaking to yourself, to the mirror, or reading it to friends. It doesn't matter, but you have to practice it actively if you expect to use it actively in a different context. And let me tell you, when these words start to come out, it's really a thrilling moment, and you know that it paid off. For everyone, the time is going to differ. For some people, they can rehearse or practice it a week, 2 weeks. For others, a month or 2. It depends. Everyone is different. The more advanced, point number 3, the more advanced you become, the more quickly you will activate new words. So this process will quicken. In the beginning, it might be tedious, but it will improve with time. Again, time is on your side if you're consistent. New words can be discovered in any medium, videos, audio, podcasts. Though, however, the richest vocabulary is written. Vocabularies are written. So the richest vocabularies will always be books or articles. They won't be speeches. That's just how it is. So if you really want to enrich your life or enliven your vocabulary, read more. And next week, I'm going to talk about what to read. So you want to be there for that. And finally, this is a caveat. This is sort of a qualification. This process of increasing your vocabulary requires frequent, regular contact with English. Without frequent, regular contact, you will not improve or increase your vocabulary to any great degree, because you'll learn and then forget, learn and forget. So you'll go back and forth and not make measurable progress. All right. Oh, and the final point, and this is a sobering moment. Sober, S-O-B-E-R. Sobering moment is like a reality check. Sobering moment, there are no quick fixes or solutions. So many of you write, how can I quickly learn English? I don't know. And I don't know if anyone really knows. There are a lot of people on YouTube that will tell you they know, and they don't know. Now, a few people have a special ability, but don't count on that in yourself. If you have an amazing photographic memory, be thankful, but most of us don't. So we have to learn it through hard work. Hard work is the key. Diligent, hard work. If you're not willing to be diligent and work hard, you will not increase your vocabulary. I'm sorry to tell you that. All right. Now, getting back to the questions these two people had about, I know a lot of words, but I can't use them when I come to speak or when I'm writing in an exam. And the answer is very simple. You can't do it because you might know it in theory, but you've never practiced it actively. So in fact, you don't know it. And if you can't produce it live, it's not active. Even if you know it, in your mind, if it doesn't come out live, it's not active, and it means you need to rehearse it or practice it longer, all right? And I'm going to leave you with this. Enjoy the learning process. It's a gift of the modern age. We didn't always have the ability to learn. Certainly, we're learning now in a very interesting medium of Instagram and YouTube, but this is a gift of the modern age. Most people didn't have access to learning. Most people didn't go to Oxford or Cambridge or learn from Oxford or Cambridge graduates. You didn't have this opportunity until the modern age. It was only for special people, mainly the rich. So this is an opportunity we should all be thankful for and enjoy that process. And next week, we're going to talk on this at the same time about what is considered a good book or good literature. Now, let me answer questions. I see we have a lot of questions. So let's look at them. All right. Great. Thank you, Ruben. That's right. This will help you. Sober is the opposite of drunk. Okay, this is a good question by Ruben. Here we have, how many days does it take to become habitual to learn new words? Again, this depends on the person, but I'm not talking, I don't learn words, I learn words in context. And I learn style, the style of the sentence. So all of it attracts me. How long that takes, I can tell you, it depends. It depends on the learner, so it's hard to say. All right. Oh, someone's asked, what is a red flag? I use a phrase red flag. A red flag is a warning sign that something is not right. So if someone asks me in a message, how can I learn English in 1 month? This is a red flag that they have the wrong attitude towards learning and towards the language. Now, not always. Sometimes you're in a very difficult situation for your job, where you weren't able to plan ahead. We all have those emergency situations. I'm not talking about those, but most of the time, people want to learn quickly, not because they are in a very special situation, but because they're lazy and because they really don't want to learn. So they want to learn as quick as possible and then move on with their life. Language is a lifetime process. Now that doesn't, so I'm also learning. It's a lifetime process. If you're a writer, if you're a teacher or a professor as I am, I want to always improve to be able to articulate and communicate better. So red flags are these warning signs. All right, now this is a great question that teachers rightfully have. How to motivate students to learn vocabulary? Thank you very much for this question. I can tell you what I think the secret is. I don't think any method that you tell them is the secret. I think the secret is in your enthusiasm for the learning of the new word or the new phrase. If you genuinely, as a teacher, enjoy this, they will feel it and they will start to pick up this excitement. And I genuinely find this very interesting. And I think that a lot of students, if they're interested in your class, will be motivated. Those who aren't interested and don't listen, so I'm teaching at university, I have motivated students and non-motivated students. The students who want to learn, or the students who are in the middle, I can generally push, bring them with me through excitement. So to answer your question, through excitement. But you can't force students to learn or be excited about learning. But you can give them a model or an example, and that is very effective. Now, this is a great question, and we're going to talk about this next week. Is it better to read fiction or nonfiction with vocabulary? Both are good. Fiction is a little bit more expressive, a little bit more creative. Nonfiction has a few more parameters. Parameters are boundaries on the writing, because you have to be realistic in what you're depicting. And so in that sense, it's a little bit more circumscribed. Circumscribed is limited. So fiction, I guess, would be the answer, but I prefer nonfiction. And I'll talk about that next week. I want to just give a shout out here because I think it's Lun Amber. Amber sings. At this point, I learn new words because I like them aesthetically. That is beautiful. And you will remember these words because you don't feel like you're studying. And if you don't feel like you're studying, you don't want to quit. But when you feel like you're studying, guess what? You need a break. Let's take a break. I'm tired of studying. But if you enjoy it, you're not studying. It's a lifestyle of learning is how I would describe it. The time of the lectures every Wednesday is the same every time. All right. All right, so again, we have a question, very typical question, how to learn and remember. Avan has asked how to learn and remember all words. Well, you don't remember all words, firstly, no one does. You learn them in the way I've suggested. It's a process that you learn the meaning, the context, and the style of the language. So you learn three things in one. And that includes phrasal verbs. Use phrasal verbs in this format. Now, I know there are some times when you want to learn, and I'm not saying it's always wrong, so please don't misunderstand me. If you want to learn phrasal verbs, look up, look in, look on, look over, all these sort of phrasal verbs, actually, I'm not sure those are all phrasal verbs, but if you want to learn it in that sequence to understand the differences, that is a very solid approach to learning the differences in the phrasal verbs, grouping them. This is a very solid methodology of group learning these words. It's not in the sort of thing I discussed today, but I'm not suggesting my way is the only way, but I want to give emphasis to what I've understood as a neglected area of learning, which is this enjoyment. I don't see much of this enjoyment, neither in the teachers that I'm seeing mainly, nor in the student questions that I'm receiving. We're void of excitement. It's things I have to do. And I want to infuse means to put in, I want to infuse this discussion with enjoyment, with excitement. Because listen, we should be, especially at university, you should be enjoying this because you selected your subject to learn. So it should be enjoyable. So, but it's obviously there are certain times you have to memorize things. Okay, I've got to note the difference between look up and look on and look over. That's fine. Those moments exist and you need to do it, but not all the time. All right. Thank you, Mahmoud, Dr. Mahmoud. All right. How to practice vocabulary if no one is there to hear me. I practiced alone. I spoke to the mirror, to myself. You can just read these sentences to yourself. And I love it because, so I play a game. I didn't tell you the full story, but I challenge myself. Every article I've written, because I'm a writer of history, every article, I would have a list of 10 new words that I found, in these sentences. And I would set a goal. I'm going to use 10 new words in this article. And so I made a game out of it because I like to play such games. And I would always include, 5 to 10 completely new words or new phrases in this. So you can do these things on your own, by yourself. And I'll say it again, writing is the best way to improve it, but it's the least enjoyable for most people. I understand it. When I was young, I did not like to write. But as I get older, it's part of my, how I breathe and I write. I just enjoy it. It's a great way to sort of develop your, to express yourself and develop your thinking. So writing is the best way, and it's the best way because it does one thing further than just speaking. Speaking, you're active, but with writing, you're active with your mind, your hand. There's a physical coordination. There's also, there's a visual there that the speaking doesn't have. So you're incorporating more of the senses. That's why it's a better form, and you remember it longer. So I've learned all the big words I know, and I'm still learning, but I've learned as many words as I do mainly through writing. Because once I see it and I write it a few times, I don't forget it. I remember it. But I've done it a long time now. So now it is a faster process, and it can be just as the same for you. All right. Thank you, Arabi. Can I share the sentences I was rehearsing? I can show you a few of these sentences. I have this list here, I think, don't I, of these sentences. So I'll have to get them up here. But just, I took random sample because I have hundreds and hundreds of these sentences. And just a few of them here. So I'll just go through and tell you why. I'll read just a few. I'll start from the top. Why I like the sentence. Since now this is something I really enjoy talking about. So, so since you asked, I will tell you. The document that Marat had brandished from the returning Pope. Now, to brandish, you normally brandish a sword or a weapon. But what I loved about it, first brandish, when I wrote this 20 years ago or so, was new to me. So brandish was a new word, and then it was used in a secondary meaning, to brandish a document. It's a beautiful phrase that I just absolutely love. And brandish is a word now I love, in part because of this sentence that I just found so interesting. And as a native speaker, I'm a lot like you sometimes. You read a sentence and you go, wow. That's beautiful. How did they write that? And now I know because these sentences become part of my own lexicon, my own sort of style. Look at the next one. While the vast tangle of criminal jurisdiction, the vast tangle is to, get really confused. So if you're tying your shoestrings, they can get tangled. Cords on computers get tangled. So the vast tangle of criminal jurisdiction. This is a beautiful way of saying the law codes are very confusing. The laws are confusing. I just loved how they use the word vast tangle. So interesting. And so when you enjoy this process as much as I do, you learn these words and phrases and context very freely. And then you start to use them, and I will use these phrases now and hopefully inspire you to use or to learn new phrases yourself. All right, so those are just two. I don't want to belabor this point. Belabor is to talk too much about it. So let's move on. I'm just, maybe just 3 or 4 more minutes. All right. All right. Does English newspapers help you increase vocabulary? Yes, they do, especially mainstream newspapers. They hire very competent writers to write for them. So any of the big newspapers will generally have very good writers. I'll talk about literature and sources next week. I don't want to. Aesthetics. What is aesthetics? These are the senses. Someone's asked about anesthetics. That's something different, actually. It's a medical term that deals with numbing your senses before surgery. Hello, Jordan. Yes, I will. Thank you very much, Marcel. Thank you, Marcel. Oh, this is a really good question. How many words are appropriate to rehearse in a day? I think more, it's just consistency, not the number. It depends how much time you have. But I think you have to touch a word in the beginning, touch it actively, periodically, regularly. I don't know if that's once a week, once every 3 days. Of course, more regularly, more frequently will mean you learn it faster. Every day you will learn it faster than once a week. So it depends on your time and how you learn. So that's an individual question. But the point is it must be regular and relatively frequent. All right. All right. I think we're finished. I'm trying to... All right, Rare Bunny, where is your question? Please, Rare Bunny has asked me a question. Can you please, maybe write it in a direct message. I can't see it. Oh, here we go. I don't see your question. All right, so please write me. Okay, we've got a question on poetry that's not really related. I will answer it when we talk about poetry. This is a very good question from Ola. Is learning specific vocabulary for business English the same? Now, this is a very good question. Okay, so business English is practical. You want to be very practical with this. What words and phrases do you need in certain circumstances? So I don't think you have to fall in love with these phrases. I think you just have to learn them. And so in this sense, I'm not saying that business English is, non-aesthetic, but I think in some cases you just have to understand what's the appropriate phrase and then use it. Now, once you learn basic business phraseology, then you can begin to beautify your phrases. Even in a business context, you can be very elegant. But in the beginning, standard set phrases in specific contexts, you just learn them. And then later you can be a little bit more creative, I think at the advanced levels. But in lower levels of English, oftentimes you just need to learn the basic parlance. Parlance is basic vocabulary for certain fields. But you can do that while enjoying it. All right. I think we are finished. If I didn't get to your question, then I'm going to ask you to please write me a direct message. I don't see. If I didn't get to your question, I apologize. Write me a direct message and I will answer that question. Thank you all for a very good live. Thank you for your questions. You can watch this again, or if you came late, on YouTube. I'll have the link in my bio, and I'll also put it on Instagram. Thank you all very much and have a great evening. Bye-bye.